You're most welcome. Very grateful you're joining us today, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to, we do not have the facilities to take questions from you, but I hope you enjoy the presentation. Well, no more ado, but again, to welcome you, Peter Obi, to Chatham House. It's a privilege for us to have you. And I myself am very much looking forward to hearing about your vision for policy change and institutional reforms in Nigeria. Nigeria is a central part of the work of this institute, which is why we are having Nigeria Week here this week. So I want to invite you to come to the podium here and give your presentation, and then we'll have a conversation after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. Let me respectfully stand on all due and existing protocols. In agreement with my belief in the primacy of gratitude among virtues, please allow me to begin today with a word of gratitude. I'm most grateful to Chatham House, Dr. Ellis Vines, and his team for the global impact of their mission and commitment to engagement with nation building in Nigeria. In providing this global platform to interrogate the vision of those seeking to lead Nigeria at this time with clear existential threats, as I will discuss shortly, are pervasive across our dear country. This Chatham House event challenges us to a new thinking. We have an alarming insecurity that led to loss of many lives and properties, significant decline in food and economic output, immense trauma that has compromised the mental health of communities, and in some cases, identities, pressures, and disaffection with the Nigerian project. The economy is in crisis with a troubling debt profile worsened by oil theft of proportion once hard to imagine. 2 economic recessions in 6 years and lamentable power sector have significantly constrained manufacturing and social life. The Nigerian state is captive to an elite gang-up and a rentier political economy that concentrated power in hands of those who came to power and influence mainly through their own contrivances and influence rather than affirmation of the people, and therefore do not have the incentive to serve the people. Even after exploiting the ethnic and religious cleavages, sentiments to ascend to political power, the very people on whose sentiments they grab power often become the primary victims of such political fraud that has rendered Nigeria a failing state with worsening leadership crisis. Consequently, Nigerian democracy had been on the wane, evident in Afrobarometer longitudinal tracking, which reveals low voter turnout. But this seems to have turned around dramatically last year, allowing independent National Electoral Commission to register over 12 million new voters, with many more complaining they wish to register, but unable to do so due to an INEC deadline. What prompted this turnaround? We may ask. The reason for these very high stakes are lurking in the facts of demographics, with our dominant population, the youth, frustrated and unhappy with the status quo and diminished opportunities in Nigeria in an age of globalization where internet can easily reveal to them prosperous homes of those who live in a better led and governed countries. How did we, Nigeria, plunge or get here in such an economic decline that we have overtaken India as a home for the biggest pool of absolute poor in the world, when they are 7 times our population? While the poverty rate in India is 16%, that of Nigeria is 63%, with 133 million people classified as multidimensionally poor. This is unacceptable and needs to change. What Nigeria needs is a great escape. As 2015 Nobel Prize winner in economics, Angus Deaton of Princeton University, elucidated that what separates poor and rich nations is attributed to health and education. For what provides quality health and educational system for a society, committed and focused leadership that can build and sustain public wealth, as I was told by Professor Donald Jacob of Kellogg School of Management. In many ways, this is the heart of my remarks today, which are deeply rooted in my upbringing, particularly my mother's counsel, that I live a life of positive impact and manage both personal and public resources most prudently for the sustainable, inclusive growth of development of the society. It is this principle that guided my stewardship as governor of Anambra State of Nigeria and led to our much commended performance with some prize awards to show for it. Some awards for outstanding accomplishments in key Millennium Development Goals, now Sustainable Development Goals. It is the same counsel and principle that is guiding and motivating me to offer to serve in a new Nigeria. The answer lies in leadership, institution, and demographics. The good news is that the demography is driving the change we're seeing in Africa, with election after election last year in Africa, in which establishment parties are being upon by new and small parties. It is this change that my vision of policy change and institutional development is rooted in a push for a broadened scope of social mobility and freedom for Nigeria, particularly for the youth and women. Like the former British Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan, said, at the start of the independence decade, a wind of change is blowing across Africa. Today, that new wind of change sees the ballot box as being instrumental to changing of bad leadership. Senator Yusuf Dat Ahmed, my running mate, and I are committed to new politics that start with ethics of servant leaders and anchored on marriage of clean hearts and skillful hands. We know that unless we change the politics by changing the political leadership, we are stuck in this terrible state of underdevelopment and misery. We will build patriotically our institutions, particularly the ones directly responsible for implementing government policies, to make them fit for purpose. It is not to be doubted at the global scene that Nigeria is blessed with some of the most entrepreneurial youths in the world, in science, in business, in art and entertainment. We believe that what remains is the changing of leadership class, from predictors to creators of value, from those whose wealth and power drive from the decision of the nation and its people to those who have demonstrated competence, character, capacity to invest in human development, create prosperity, and instill right values and ethical conduct deserving of servant leaders. Nigeria today is at a critical juncture, and the people led by the youth, brutalized by bad leadership, are awake and leading the movement to transform Nigerian politics and restart the engine of economic growth and social stability. We count ourselves honored to be trusted, especially by the youth, to lead this democratic revolution, and we are deeply pledged to do so with sincerity, accountability, and unquenchable love and desire for a better Nigeria. We are simply the symbol of Nigerian youth struggle to reverse this ugly trend that keep driving them into social anomia, despair, and rejection of their country. We are determined to do everything that needs to be done to rescue and lead our country to prosperity, freedom, security, and peace. We will use merit to assemble competent Nigerians from all sections of Nigeria to form effective government of national unity. At the heart of my goal here today is to look at our Labour Party's key policy plans and how they will drive up the quality of life of average Nigerian, dramatically reduce poverty, and return Nigeria to a place of strategic relevance in a world that needs a thriving and well-governed Nigeria, stabilizing the continent of Africa, making it high-value add for a planet impaired by environmental challenges, terrorism, and inequity. Also plan to speak on institutions and how the leadership we offer can facilitate the evolution of stronger institutions with the rule of law a key anchor to nation building in Nigeria. I have no doubt that the policy choice we favor and the strong institutions Labour Party will facilitate will move Nigeria from a country of rent seekers sharing oil receipts and consuming conspicuously to the one that produces based on vast factor endowments whose value chains can move us towards a high employment economy. We will turn our youth budget to a democratic dividend rather than today's harvest of time bomb of violence, insecurity from uneducated, unemployed, and marginalized youth. This forms the first and most important thrust of our government priorities, without which the rest will not be achieved, to secure Nigeria, end banditry and insurgents, and unite our dear nation to manage our diversity so that no one is left behind. The growing insecurity you see in Nigeria today is not because the enemy is formidable. It is not a lack of focused leadership, ineffective security government structure, and poor coordination from the center. All this needs to be addressed by first, projecting strong leadership, signal that will allow both state and non-state actors to be mobilized around single vision. Then by pursuing a robust reform of the security governance structure, coordinating mechanism that assures all levels of government, federal, states, local, with three-level policing are aligned with strong collaboration with partners from both private and development groups to provide required services and deliver results for every Nigerian. Once this is done, it is important to have a single, clear, coherent, consistent development process. It is important for institutions to be able to provide strong leadership, coordination, capability, partner, and engage collaboratively with all relevant stakeholders in an environment that mutually reinforces values. The second plank of our policy thrust is to shift emphasis from consumption to production by running a production-centered economy that is driven by agrarian revolution and export-oriented industrialization. With about 70 million hectares of arable land, we will pursue an agricultural revolution through proper segmentation of Nigerian to activate and harness factor endowment of different parts of the country for both rapid and mechanized agricultural development and as a pillar for Nigerian other sectoral development and industrialization. We will incentivize and invest in an agro-cluster and industrial cluster development across our geo-resource zones to take advantage of agglomeration and scale effects of particularly in the Northwest, Northeast, and North Central regions of Nigeria. We will dredge both River Niger and River Benue, build dams massively to support planting of economic trees across the country for local usage, poverty and elimination, export and revenue generation. A key task is to sequentially but decisively dismantle the inefficient and anti-market distortionary structures restraining Nigerian economy from creating a precondition for a dynamic pro-market economy. We will employ entrepreneurial governance to dismantle impediments to free trade and ease of doing business, and implementing radical economic policies that will drastically reduce our debt service, a major drain to government revenue as it is today. Our micro, small and medium scale enterprises will be robustly supported. Further borrowing must be strictly for productive purposes and not for consumption. While we aggressively pursue the activation of all opportunities in oil and gas value chain, we will target incentive schemes that will be professionally administered to diversify our non-oil export portfolio with proper consideration and management of climate change risk and opportunities. The third pillar of our government priorities is to restructure the polity through effective legal and institutional reforms to entrench rule of law, aggressively fight corruption, reduce the cost of governance, and establish honest and efficient civil service. Reducing costs of governance in Nigeria is an effective way of fighting institutional corruption. In addition to reducing the cost of governance and streamlining government operations for efficiency and effectiveness, we will ensure that reforms we pursue will not in any way affect the livelihood of our hardworking and efficient civil servants. Critical to fighting corruption, we will install a new budgeting system founded on the cardinal principle of public accountability, objective setting, and program implementation. This is against the extant budgetary principles of revenue mobilization, expenditure allocation, borrowing without emphasis on monitoring, evaluation, and feedback. We will enforce principles of performance, auditing, institutionalized monitoring, and evaluation process of the entire public service delivery as the primary means of actualizing our vision of the new Nigeria. This reform will institutionalize our personal involvement of both the president and the vice president in setting budgetary objectives of MDAs, and monitoring, evaluating the implementation process through Office of Regulatory Review in the Office of the President. Budget monitoring and evaluation capacity will be strengthened within the presidency. We will embark on effective micro and physical restructuring to quickly restore physical viability by discontinuing unaffordable subsidies which have left a black hole in government finances. Fiscal and monetary policy will be properly coordinated with each conventional tool transparently instead of distorting markets in favor of privileged few. For instance, an avoidance of doubt, we will collaborate with Central Bank of Nigeria for a transparent liberalization of our foreign exchange market and dismantling of OPEC multiple exchange rates. Regime which effectively subsidies few privileged persons. We will seek to boost the supply side rather than continue to concentrate exclusively on demand management of foreign exchange. When unaffordable subsidies are removed, some carefully calibrated transfers will be used to cushion adverse impact on economically weak. If the competitiveness of the sector is to be enhanced, then we will do so via enactment of transparent and specifically target fiscal and trade policies designed to stimulate investment and growth. Revenue shortfalls and leakages such as oil theft will be dealt with decisively by holding persons in position of authority fully accountable. The fourth plank of our governance priorities is to leapfrog into the fourth industrial revolution through application of scientific technological innovation to create digital economy. Building on the gains of agriculture-led manufacturing and export, we will pursue development of knowledge and skills to leverage on the emerging disruptive digital technologies, automation, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, robotics, virtual reality, blockchain technology, biotechnology, and data science, all of which are the heart of the fourth industrial revolution. The fifth plank of our government priorities is to build expansive infrastructure for efficient power supply, rail, road, and air transportation, and pipeline network through integrated public-private partnership and entrepreneurial public sector governance. Our solution to the perennial power problem in Nigeria is comprehensive and it's well covered in our manifesto. We will ensure that we deal with the issue of transmission distribution. However, we will immediately complete the 2.3 billion Nigeria Siemens network improvement deal to achieve a stable 7,000 by the end of this year, 11,000 megawatts by 2024, and 25,000 megawatts by 2025. We will support local manufacturing capacities and power technologies and encourage and expand local R&D in universities, training centers, and workshops, through which many jobs will be created. Our sixth priority program is to enhance human capital development of our youth for productivity and global competitiveness through investment in education, in research, quality health, and entrepreneurial education. The World Bank Human Capital Development Index ranks Nigeria 168 over 173. To move Nigeria right to the top bracket of the index, we will pursue a Marshall Plan type program on education that incorporates compulsory technical and vocational skills, sports, entrepreneurship, programming, digital skills from primary to secondary school level. In line with this commitment to transform our educational sector, we will prioritize funding of this critical sector. Our tertiary institution will be remodeled to serve as hubs and centers of research, development, and commercialization of ideas for quick industrialization of Nigeria. Finally, our seventh priority is to conduct an Afrocentric diplomacy that protects the rights of Nigerian citizens abroad, advances the economic interests of Nigerians and Nigerian businesses in a changing world. In concluding, let me say that the problem with Nigeria is at once complex and simple. It rests on leadership. As our erudite Professor Chinua Achebe stated, the trouble with Nigeria is simply and squarely a failure of leadership. In Achebe's view, there's nothing basically wrong with Nigerian character. The Nigerian problem is the unwillingness or inability of his leaders to rise to the responsibility, to the challenge of leading in the front by example, which is the hallmark of true leadership. When people of competence, character, commitment, compassion take over the leadership and pursue their mission and tasks with seriousness required, a new Nigeria characterized by peace, unity, prosperity, inclusiveness will be achieved and sustained. That is what's driving Dati, Baba Ahmed, and I to join to offer to lead this desire and crusade of Nigerian, particularly the youth, for an inclusive and sustainable Nigeria that works for all. In line with my upbringing, especially my mother's counsel, my promise is that Nigerian resources will be most prudently used for Nigerians. And as Commander-in-Chief, I, Mr. Peter Obi, sincerely pledge that our path with Nigeria will be diligently pursued to create a new Nigeria characterized by sustained and inclusive growth and development for all. Thank you, and God bless all of you.
Thank you. Peter, I don't know if you want to sit for a moment while we take a few questions. We'll take them in threes, or you can stay there as you wish.
Yeah.
Look, the first question, we have, at the moment, the analytics are showing we have tens of thousands of people watching. So my apologies if you are on Facebook, YouTube, the Chatham House channel. We can't take questions from you. On Zoom, we have hundreds of questions that have come in. One question is from Baba Femi Adibola, who said, is asking the following question. Given the complexity of Nigeria's democracy and the Labour Party not projected to have the majority in the National Assembly, how would you work with legislators to ensure the radical reforms you are proposing come to light if you win the presidential election? So that's one question. Just hold that there. And I'm going to go right to the back of the room, right at the corner there. The gentleman right in the corner. Yes. So, yes, you. Please go ahead. Introduce yourself and one question, please.
All right. Thank you. My name is Ajiboye Tsumishi. from Huddersfield University. So my question is simple. The activities of the IPOB in Nigeria is on alarming rate every day. And with all the policy, beautiful ideas that you've listed down, sir, without tackling security head on, they are impossible. So one of the allegations given to you is that you've not condemned the activities of the IPOB. So, and the tackling of security.
Can you sum up, please?
Plan. Tackling of security.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's.
Sorry, I'm a student. We are to line. Tackling of security. How will you tackle it, sir? Are you introducing?
Please.
Are you introducing state police, or are you strengthening the federal government security apparatus? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have another question that has come in, which I want to ask from our virtual audience, and it's from Vivian Ahekwezu, who's asking the following. Vivian is asking, for many years, Nigeria has underinvested in healthcare. What are your plans for achieving universal health coverage, where access to healthcare is a right rather than a privilege, as well as ensuring sustained funding for epidemic preparedness and response? We did have a similar question for Mr. Tinubu in the last session that we did. So there are 3 questions there for you, Peter, and then I'll come through the audience here. Please just be patient.
First question is, how do you deal with the legislators, considering that Labour Party is probably not in control of the legislative arm of the government? Quite frankly, I have been through this as the governor. When I was elected and sworn in as the governor, I have 30 House members, not from my party. In fact, nobody from my party was involved. As long as you are pursuing what is right, everybody will go with you, because the legislator is insecure in his place. He knows that his people are without job, and that's what he wants. He wants development. What else is he elected to do? It becomes a problem when you are pursuing transactional policies, which will benefit you, or you're engaging in nepotism where you have to. But if you address it by strictly following the Constitution, which spells out that the system is characterized by simply that we have diversity and all is included, and you did the right things, you don't need to worry about that. The issue of IPOB, maybe you're not following me. Even yesterday, I spoke about Biafra being ended 53 years ago. It's all over the place in this space. I condemn all agitators, but in condemning them, you have to look at what brought about these agitations all over the place. It's not only IPOB. We have Yoruba Nation movement. We have all sorts. When you have created this level of massive poverty, where 63% of your population is poor, you're going to create all sorts of problems. I was speaking to a British minister this morning. He said we have about 40% unemployment. And we have about 60% youth unemployment. Young people in their productive age doing nothing. If you have 15% unemployment in Britain today, you're going to have massive, remember, agitation. Nobody will be able to leave his house. So what we have seen is a cumulative effect of leadership failure over the years, which will be solved by good governance. When people start seeing justice, fairness, and inclusive government and doing the right thing, all those things will start reversing itself. And that is what me and that is offering. I will talk and discuss with all agitators. There's nothing wrong in that. People agitate even in my house, and I talk with them. So I'll deal with everybody. I'll show you of that. Don't worry about that. On the issue of health, yes, we have a problem with health. We have underinvested, and because our government have not prioritized our development agenda, everybody knows that the only measure of development as recognized globally today is Human Development Index. And this is hanged on 3 items: life expectancy, which is health. And we are low in that. Nigerian life expectancy today is about 50-something, as against global average of 72. So we're low. Same in education. So it's to prioritize that. I just gave somebody an example. In the past 5 years, from 2015 to 2021, Nigerian budget in health is under 2.5 trillion for 200 million people. It's unacceptable. This year, our budget for health is about 1.5 trillion. Our budget for education is about 2 trillion. 2 of them combined, annual budget is about 3.5 trillion. When your 6-month budget for subsidy, which is a criminalized, listen, it's 3.6 trillion. It's unacceptable. You have to put money in key development areas, as Professor Dutton had just mentioned, that I read out here, that what separates country, rich and poor, is health and education. So it's clear. So we will deal with it. But he said, how do you cover it? Nations of our size have covered it. How did India, for 1.4 billion people, cover the issue of health? How did Indonesia cover that? We have big nations that have done it well. People who don't know how to do, we learn from them. There's nothing wrong in learning if you don't know how to do it.
I'm going to take more questions. Now, there is someone who has such a strong arm. Their arm has been up for 15 minutes. Now, I'm not going to say that's criteria for taking question next time. But, madam, you get the question. You have the strongest arm in the audience. Please introduce yourself. One question.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon and welcome, sir. My name is Priscilla Winkbo, and I'm an independent broadcaster here in London. And sir, you spoke about your point number 5, which is to generate electricity and power in Nigeria. And you spoke about transmission, distribution, and generation. But I think it's fair to say that our problems with power goes beyond those 3 areas. And the main problem that I see here is this. We have a population or part of the economy, shall we say, those who supply spare parts, the engineers, those who work within that sector, whether it's those that are selling generators. And we know that that issue is perhaps the biggest issue when it comes to our power generation. So my question here is this. How do you plan, number 1, and I'm going to take a risk here, to deal with the big boys? And how do you also plan to address that economy that will then no longer exist because you have generated power? Because I'm sure that they too will rise up against it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We did online have lots of questions about refining also. And so this is a key issue that people are asking question about. So the gentleman there, a bit further along. Yes, there, you, just there. Yeah. Please go ahead, introduce yourself.
Thank you very much.
Question.
Good to see you, Peter. Paul Arkwright, I was the British High Commissioner to Nigeria from 2015 to 2018. And it's good to see you in London, sir. Thank you very much for your talk. I've now moved into private business. I'm a consultant, and I'm advising companies and funds, investors to look at Africa, to look at Nigeria, to consider investing there, and everyone agrees, I think, that FDI, foreign direct investment, is critical to the future of Nigeria. But at the moment, they're very cautious, and that's putting it diplomatically. When you become president, sir, could you tell me the sort of 3 things you would do in the first, let's say, 100 days, which would send the right signal to foreign investors to look again at Nigeria, not just look again at Nigeria, but to invest in Nigeria? Because as you know, I'm one of Nigeria's strongest supporters, and I think this is a country which is worth investing in. Thank you.
Okay. And I will come back to this side. The gentleman just there, you, sir, just there. No, behind, sorry. You're the lucky one. One question, short, please. Give your name.
Good evening. It's William Owomayi, the UK's Young Ambassador to the Commonwealth and a member of Chatham House. You've caught Nigeria by storm in recent months with your campaign and your vision to unify Nigeria, mobilizing young people all across the country. You mentioned debt a few times in your speech. Currently, the government is repaying debt to the central bank at an interest rate of 19.5%, which is extremely high. How do you plan to support the next generation?
The government is
repaying the central bank debt by 19.5% interest rate. How do you plan to support the next generation by dealing with the debt repayment crisis? And also, how do you plan to deal with tackling financial transparency in Nigeria? The central bank hasn't released its balance sheet in about 3 years.
Thank you. There you go, Peter. 3 questions.
Let me start with my sister there. He talked about the big, what you're saying is about the big boys who are selling generators. Let me assure you what we've been campaigning on. Our campaign, you have heard them say we don't have structures. That is the structure we're trying to destroy. Structure of criminality. That is what I mentioned. Now Nigeria is being held captive. That structure is structure that impoverished Nigeria. We will dismantle it. It will not be there. I assure you of that. We're going to turn around the power sector. Nigeria generates about, today, 56,000 megawatts of electricity for 200 million people. And South Africa, the second biggest in terms of economy in the continent, 5 to 6,000, that's 5 to 6,000, sorry. South Africa, the second biggest economy, 60 million people, generates about 40 to 50,000. And South Africa, in the past 3 months, have declared emergency in power and said anybody can generate up to 100 megawatts without license. So somebody who is 60 million, generating about over 40,000, declared emergency. What do you think somebody with 2 million people generating 5 to 6,000 will do? War. I'm going to declare war on power, and I'll solve it. Anybody who stands on the way, so be it. Bringing back foreign investor is very simple, Paul. Foreign investor is like bee and honey. What you need is to create honey. The way bee will find the place is very simple. Foreign capital is scared of corruption. It's scared of bad policies. It's scared of where there's no rule of law. You need to put a regulatory environment that makes it conducive. You need to secure it. That is at the heart of what Dati and I are offering. We will build that intangible assets of securing the country, making sure that we govern through rule of law. We will fight corruption. That they have a record. That is the only National Assembly member who refused to buy property of government when it was offered to all National Assembly members. You can go and look at his record. If you have seen anywhere he has compromised or put himself in a transactional position. Now stop running. I know how I approached him, and I told him, I and you owe it to save our people. So we came together, and we came back and said, we'll work as a team. We'll solve this problem. Go and check my record. I've governed the state for 8 years, and I've challenged everybody while you were there. I've been the only governor till today. The day I left office, I was not owing salary, pension, gratuity, or any contract or any supplier. And I left with 3 banks in Nigeria, which I say every day. Access Bank of Nigeria, Fidelity Bank of Nigeria, and Diamond Bank. I left over $150 million. I didn't say naira. And I have over 30 billion naira. And Anambra State, you can go and verify. Never had a bottle. Anambra State have never bought me. There's no land allocated directly or indirectly by me, and I signed over several thousands of CFO. Anambra has never bought me a bottle of water since I left office. So you can go. We will fight and stop corruption. The first thing about stopping corruption is yourself. If you're not involved, your wife is not involved, your family is not involved, those around you are not involved, you reduce it by over 50%. Yeah. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm sure, Paul, you know that. We are committed. We can't disappoint these youth. We must build a new Nigeria. And we'll deal with that. Investors will come back. Those who left, even the young people who are today living, they'll come back. We want to bring them back. Nigerians are prepared to come back if they can find that they have a country to go back to. This green passport, people must be proud to use it. On issue of capital, where do you find money? My young brother, there's nothing wrong in borrowing. Borrowing is a legitimate way of every government I've studied in the world borrow. Even Britain, as we speak, owes over 70% of their GDP. Every government I know lives on borrowing. Even Norway with 1.4 trillion sovereign wealth is owing. The economies of the world, the third biggest nation in the world is America. The debt of America today is almost 100% of their GDP. The second, China, is almost over 60% of their GDP. Japan owes over 230% of their GDP. But let me tell you the difference. Japan is owing over 230% of their GDP. They invested the money to save their economy. And in that, even with that, Japan is still the highest holder of US treasuries. So there's something they can fall back on. What has happened? So borrowing is not wrong. If I have done, I compare 2 countries that have borrowed with Nigeria and how well they've done. But what has happened is that when you borrow for consumption, you have a crisis. Nigeria borrowed for consumption. Nigeria in 2015 had a GDP per capita of $2,550. And they were owing about 15 trillion naira. Today, with central bank ways and means, we're owing over 75. So we have grown that debt by about 400%, but our per capita is 2,000. That means that the money we borrowed was thrown away. So that is what I'm going to revert. We will restructure the debt as it is today. We will restructure it and put it in a long time to be able to pay it. I'm a finance person, that is one. And then we will not say, like I said here, no more borrowing for consumption. We will see borrow, people will see it, it will be transparent, it will be for investment. And that's what we intend to do. Countries have been in this situation before. We're not in a situation where other countries haven't passed before. It's a question of showing leadership, and we will be able to solve it. Thank
you. I'm coming back. We are now almost around 60,000 people just watching us and sending in questions. So we're trying to be at least a bit inclusive. We have a question from Debo Ademoyo, who is asking, what are your policy ideas on climate change? Do you have a plan for ensuring sustainability in a new government? So that's one question. Then there was a joint question from Miss Etty and Zindi Anthony Levy, and they're asking, insecurity is a major problem. What are your plans in tackling this? What are your plans in terms of security sector reform in Nigeria? I'm going to take two more physical questions in the room. The lady right in the front here. So I'm not going to discriminate with the front rows. Please go ahead.
My name is Chi Chikwendo. I'm a practicing solicitor here, advocating, of course, for rule of law. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for the inspiring exposition on your vision for policy change and institutional reforms. It seems to me that it's clear from that if elected president, if and when elected president, your transformation vision to increase the production capabilities across the various sectors mentioned, including agriculture, extraction industries, human resources, will, to a large extent, hinge on the depth of your level of commitment with Sadati and ownership to implement the proposed policy changes and institutional reforms. However, there is no doubt in my mind that Your Excellency is well aware of the prevailing fundamental challenges to those reforms, including clientele patronage, political capture, and the institutionalized corruption that you mentioned. So the question is, how do you intend to navigate these challenges differently from the efforts of previous administrations, particularly with a view to modifying the behaviors of the key players in support of achieving those anticipated outcomes? And I was very warmed when you mentioned you're broadening the scope of youth inclusion and women based on gender issues. So further, how do you intend to quell the current ethnic tensions ravaging our communities and consequently stagnating economic growth and development, and to implement a pragmatic mechanism for dealing with those societal concerns for equal...
Please. We need... The longer this takes, the less questions. Madam, please, now.
So the question there is, how do you intend to implement a pragmatic mechanism for dealing with those societal concerns for equal access to the services, inclusive participation, and integrating the various ethnic groups?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Peter, if you answer those questions, because that was more than one question.
Well, let me start with the issue of, you have, like you said, you have more than one question. I have about two questions. Let me start with the issue of ethnic tension. The ethnic tension you see today is based and as a result of injustice, unfairness, exclusion, marginalization. As you start reversing that, you start going down. That is what I said to the young man about agitation. As long as you start doing the right things, so that you start building an inclusive society where people's talent, hard work will match up their opportunity, you start seeing those things go down. There's tension, even in the Western world. I live here when the blacks feel excluded. But as the more the government opens up and tolerates and builds an inclusive, transparent, more broad-based, acceptable, they will come down. So we will show, I've said before, we will show compassion. We will show love. Because there's nothing, you're a leader. Don't go away when Basa is under the water. Don't leave Jigawa to die. Don't say, oh, I cannot go to Southern Kaduna because of the problem. We will show compassion. We will lead from the front. We're not going to walk away. And for me, Borno is part of Nigeria. I don't want to tell people, oh, the is insecure. Nigeria is insecure. Like I told the IDP people in Christmas, I spent with IDP people in Makurdi in Christmas. And in New Year was another IDP camp in Abuja. And I said to them, as long as Nigerians are in IDP, all of us are in IDP. I will not allow, and I know that you will not allow it, for any Nigerian to remain in IDP while we're sleeping in our mansions. Never. They must go back. On issue of challenges and dealing with the challenges you foresee, I've dealt with such challenges at the Anambra level. And I'll show you the same challenges. We're not going to, as long as you're not involved in this transnational governance, you can deal with anybody. We're not going to compromise. We have an issue. I said we are at an existential threat that we don't need to. There's nobody, there's no sacred cow. You either be a Nigerian or you can find another country. We have a country with the rule of law. It will be the same level playing field for everybody. I want to solve the problem. For example, I said it without equivocation. I must pull out the poverty that is devastating the north. The vast land in the north is far more in terms of assets and source of revenue generation and exports for Nigeria than the oil. It's very simple. I'll give you an example of one state that I use every day. Niger State is 76,000 square kilometers. Precisely 76.3 thousand square kilometers of land. 7 local governments in that state is under control of bandits. I've tried to interview them because they have no job. They have nothing and everything. Niger State is 2.5 times the size of Netherlands. And Netherlands agricultural export last year was 120 billion. Why can't Niger State do 5% of that? They have arable land. And all they get from the revenue, from the sharing, which is the consumption, is less than 50 billion naira. When they have minus their debts and everything. If they earn 6% of 5% of that is $6 billion. At 650 is about 4 trillion, 80 times what they get from here. We will change it. Somebody talked about tackling insecurity. I've said it extensively. It is our first commitment to secure Nigeria. Securing Nigeria is not impossible. I secured Anambra State that's gone. It won't be different. I said we will deal and talk with those we will win. We'll talk with those who are winnable. It will be carrot and stick. And those who don't, we will deal with them. We're not going to shy away. Nigeria must be secured. It's a country. Every country must be secured. But we're not going to walk away from the problem. We'll deal with it. We have our armies and military used to secure Africa. So this is time to go back and resonate that spirit in which they used to secure Africa to secure Nigeria. And we will deal with it. On climate change, I've always said we'll follow the protocol. And I did mention here about issue of things like planting trees, issues of dredging. These are some of the climate change issues because as you see today, we have a situation where flooding in Nigeria because we've not dredged River Niger, River Benue and everything. And I said it consistently. This is not difficult. We've awarded contracts for it in the past. Today, every Egyptian will tell you, no Nile, no Egypt. They have used it to improve the water transportation, which dredging this one do. It's a long fight fighting climate change. They've used it for other means, which we will use the same River Niger and River Benue to do. River Niger and River Benue combined is, River Niger is 4,200 kilometers long. River Nile is 1,400. River Benue is 1,400 long. So two of them are 5,600. Nile is 6,650. If Egypt, an African country, can dredge, maintain River Nile, Nigeria is big enough to deal with this, and we will deal with it. And I assure you, you see the difference, it will be clear. Other protocols of climate change will follow it. When we find difficult, we'll negotiate and talk with other involved in that. We are signatory to it, and it's devastating the world today. So we must follow the protocol.
Thank you. The clock is ticking. We're on borrowed time now, but we are going over, as I said. So there's right at the front here, there's a gentleman there. I'm going to take 3 questions, and then I think the clock is going to have had its say. Short and sharp, please.
Okay,
go ahead.
Sure. Hi, good afternoon. My name's Alexis Akwajiram. I'm the managing editor of Semaphore Africa. My question is, if you become the next president, would you seek to keep the current central bank governor or replace him? And please explain your answer.
The gentleman in the middle there. Yeah. Please. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your remarks. My name is Chibuikem Ugongadi. I'm a master's student at King's College London, and it's funny, actually, my question is related to him. Given the debacle at the central bank currently and their conduct over the past 8 years, what is your view on central bank independence as a tool to improve economic growth? And how will you what will you do about the leadership at the central bank when you become president in order to make sure that their principles are in line with yours on monetary policy?
Thank you very much. The lady over there. Yes, madam, you. Yes, but sharp, please. There's a microphone just here. It's next to you, just there, please. Aha.
Your Excellency, good afternoon. So my question here is this: you talked about restructuring. As you're aware, Nigeria can barely service its external debt. Nigeria can barely service its external debt. Our current external debt, we cannot service it, or we're finding difficult to service it. Now, when you become president, how do you intend to restructure our external debt without actually downgrading our rating in the market? Thank you.
Thank you. And your name, just so we have it?
Okay,
thank you. And then if we move the microphone to the lady just there, last question. Yes.
Good afternoon. Nice to see you again, Mr. Obi. My name is Kenneth Chukwuwaba. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Cambridge. I study public-private partnerships and education. I read your manifesto, and it seems PPPs are taking a central stage in education sector. So I wanted to ask, what is your rationale for involving private actors in public education, and what governance structures would you put in place to ensure the accountability of these actors in a sensitive sector such as education? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My apologies. We've run out of time now. I'm watching the clock.
Okay. Alex, I hope you will allow me. There's somebody here that is so keen. When I was coming in, he had a question that is so interested and is like, so I told him, if I have opportunity, I will request and answer it publicly. Let me again go. People are talking about the central bank government. The problem, first, let me assure you, central bank will maintain its independence. It will be respected. And again, it is not the problem of the person there. Central bank have a role of monetary policy, if I'm right. Then you have this physical space. It's like a street football. When the person who is supposed to be in the physical space is no longer, it's like you go to a football match and somebody who is supposed to play in a particular wing is no longer there. You find people playing various wings. The weakness of the physical space allows the monetary space to take over and is supporting because there's a weak governance structure. That is why we're able to do what we're doing. When with what is happening today is happening. So if you replace Godwin and putting somebody with that level of physical rascality, which is what is fueling our inflation and even our rate of exchange today. These are some of the things you need to cut. As long as government continues on that fiscal rascality, that situation will occur. That's what you need to fix. I won't say what will happen. The step is actually coming to an end. So it won't be too long. So that's that. I assure you that we'll deal with that. You asked about PPP in education. I said in Cambridge. Is Cambridge run by British government? Now, I just want to know, because I don't know. When we're talking about PPP in education, we're talking about tertiary education. We're not talking about basic education. We will ensure that basic education is free and we will drive it aggressive because we have 20 million out-of-school children in the north, which I've said we will deal with decisively because those children mostly have learned Quran, which means they're intelligent. We'll meet them at the point of learning Quran and teach them skills. For the tertiary education, we must find a way to fund it in a collaborative way, public partnership, in order to be able to ensure that 4 years will be 4 years, not what is happening today. That's what we mean by that. And it will be, you'll see, it's a win-win situation. That's it. No, not the basic. It won't be the basic. Then, issue of barely servicing our debts. I've said it before, we're not the only country that have gone through this. Once we move from consumption to production, what we are going to do first is that what you see today, we're not able to service our debts, is because of fiscal rascality. You're paying unsustainable subsidy, which we stop from day one because it's criminal thing. You're no longer generating money because they're stealing with oil. And the only people who can steal oil are people in government, because ordinary people cannot steal oil. You can't put it in your pocket. It's something that you come with sheep. So all those, and you stop corruption, the waste, everything. And you go to seek to ensure that the revenues of government are. These are things, when you have tightened all the leakages and waste, you'll be able to increase your position and you negotiate and be able to service them. Just to give you an example, Nigeria is today the only OPEC nation, apart from Venezuela, because of sanction, that is not meeting up its quota. Because over the years of oil theft, the multinationals and everything have not been invested, coupled with the theft and everything. You're not realizing what you're supposed to. Every other nation that is in the same commission was able to bring down their rates and inflation within this period of Ukraine war. I'm not saying it's good to wait for war to be able to get more revenue, but people are taking advantage of it, because it's there. And you can't run away from it. But we couldn't take that advantage. Our situation got worse because of poor management of our own physical space, which will change with that and I. And finally, like I said, somebody kept telling me that issue that people have been saying that if I become president, that there's issue of being, how do I say that? What word do they use? Stingy. Pat knew the question of stingy. How are you going to manage? Because they said you'll be stingy and everything. Let me say it public that people don't know what it is all about. The heart of poverty is capital formation. And you can't go about capital formation without savings. Even in the most developed world, which is why I said that Japan holds highest amount of US treasury. If you listen or you go and read about what Professor Ragnar Nask done in the 50s, he showed it clearly. Capital formation is the heart of poverty. Without capital formation, you have low productivity, low income, and you produce poverty all over the place. What I was doing as governor, I was the best governor in Millennium Development Goals by the UNDP. You can go and check that. Isn't that? I won a prize for the best road network. I won the gay prize back to back on health. You can go and see what I did in health. Build scratch, teaching hospitals and everything. Improved #1 in education. And above all, I was able to save because I believe in future generation. If you look at that saving, I said future generation funding, because we want to have proper capital formation to drive tomorrow. If I have opportunity in Nigeria, no matter what we do, we'll do the same thing. We must save for tomorrow. Because that's how you form capital to turn around tomorrow. So as an end, I appeal to all of you. There's nothing more powerful than our idea whose time has come. The time today is to have competent leadership with character, commitment, and compassion. And that's what Nigeria is yearning for. That's what Dati and I are offering you. Let's have opportunity to build a better Nigeria. Thank you. Thank you.
A couple of announcements. First of all, INEC chair speaking here tomorrow, same time, 1 o'clock. You're welcome. It's also going to be live streamed. NNPP presidential candidate Wednesday, same time. And finally, again, just to thank Peter Obi for coming to Chatham House. And good luck in your campaign. And please, if you can just remain seated or on the side while Peter Obi leaves. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon. Okay.